welcome back to Christine's Home Affairs. Today I'm going to show you how to make a really quick, simple elastic waisted skirt with a stretch fabric. So there are only 4 pieces to this particular fabric. I'm going to show you how to just draft a basic skirt pattern for yourself, how to put the waist elastic in, and just basically to put it all together. You can have this done in under an hour, and if you're quick enough with your drawing, you can probably have the pattern drawn out, fabric cut out, and everything stitched together within about an hour. So it's really quick, really simple, just has a little bit of a flare at the bottom, and if you actually want a skirt that's a little bit more flary, what you'll be able to do is increase the size of the kick at the bottom of your skirt. You'll know what I'm talking about in a couple of minutes. So stick around and I will show you how to make this really simple elastic waisted skirt in under an hour. So you can see here I've actually gone and drawn my pattern up already. So what I've done is just taken my tracing paper, my Vilene, whatever I'm using, whatever you use for your pattern tracing, and I've folded that in half. Now we want to take our waist measurement and we want to divide that by 8. So for the waist measurement here, if say your waist measurement is 80 centimeters, divide that by 8 and that'll give us 10 centimeters. So this is a 4-piece pattern, but because it's on the fold, it'll be doubled, all right? And this is why we're dividing it by 8, because we're just working on that half pattern piece just there. So your full waist measurement divided by 8. Then come down from the waist to your hip line. So you'll want to take a tape measure and just measure from your waist down to your hip line, and that's where you will mark your next line. Okay, so for myself, I've got an 18 centimeter difference between my waist and my hip. So I've drawn in my waistline and I've got my hip line with an 18 centimeter gap. Then we want to measure the distance around our hip. So from around our hip, divide that by 8 as well. So if your measurement for your hip is 120, you would divide that by 8 and you would mark that distance in there. I'm a bit of a sponge body, so mine is quite square here, but you might shape yours in just a little bit like that. You might shape yours out. Depends on your body measurements. So your waist divided by 8, your hip divided by 8, the distance from your waist to your hip. Now determine what length you want your skirt to be. So take your length from your waist and measure all the way down to the finished length of your skirt. For myself, my finished skirt length is 52 centimeters. So from the waistline to the end of the skirt is 52 centimeters for myself. So I'll draw a line going across. And then we're going to add our hem allowance. Now hem allowance is whatever you want it to be. In my case, I've made it a 2 centimeter hem allowance, and I've just drawn a dotted line here for my hem allowance. We need a casing for the elastic, and that is a 3 centimeter or 1 1/4 inch casing. So I've just measured up there, and this is the casing for my elastic, and that will, when we close it later, that will fold down. Our elastic will be encased in here. Then we've got our waist all the way down to the end of our skirt. Okay, now here's the fun part. We want to create flares in the bottom of our skirt. Now, depending on how big you decide to make your flares, that will determine the fullness of your skirt at the bottom. In my case, I've done 6 centimeters here. So I've done a 6 centimeter extra on this. Remember that I've got this folded. Okay, so because I've got that folded, I'm actually allowing an extra 12 centimeters flare on this one pattern piece. And again, I'm cutting 4 of these, or I'll be needing 4 pieces. So 12 by 4 is 48 centimeters. So that means I'm going to have an extra 48 centimeters flare at the base of my skirt. All right. So to get this flare, what you need to do is determine how much flare you want and just make a mark. So I've just made a mark and said, okay, I want a 6 centimeter flare. And you'll take this mark from the hip line, and for this particular skirt anyway. So once we've done that, measure from your hip line down to the finished length of your skirt and work out what that is. In my case, it's 34 centimeters. And then from the hip line, keeping the ruler up at the top of the hip line here, make a mark of 34 centimeters going along and making sure that ruler starts at the hip line and you've got 34 centimeters all the way along. So you just keep on moving your ruler until you get, and making a mark until you get to the width of your flare. So once my flare is at my 6 centimeters, you make your mark there, and then you can just go and shape the line. You can just shape it by hand, or you can shape it with your French curve. So that is the finished hem length of my skirt. So you don't worry about this area here. Now we want our seam allowance. So we've got the 2 centimeter seam allowance along here. We want to carry that all the way across. We don't want to just keep going straight. If you go straight with your pattern across here and across here on the cutting line, you're going to have a dip in the bottom of your skirt at each seam point. So it's sort of like a handkerchief type of look. That's not what we want. We want a nice straight hem all the way around. And to do that, we've got to make sure we have the same distance from the hip line all the way around. So all the same distance from the hip line. Now, to do the hem, we do the same thing from the hip line. We come down that extra hem length. So for myself, it's 36 centimeters. Make a little mark. Keep on going, measuring from the hip line all the way out. I'm repetitive with this, but it's important that you actually take your measurement from the same point all the time. So you'll do that all the way out, and then you've got your seam allowance just there. So the dotted line is my hem allowance and my seam allowance. Your seam allowance is whatever you want it to be. So in my case, I've just done a 1 centimeter seam allowance, and I've marked that all the way along up to the top of the skirt. I don't need to worry about the seam allowance in the elastic casing. I've actually allowed for that already. So what I'm going to do is just overlock the top edge. So I'll just have a really narrow overlocked edge. You might have a zigzagged edge before I put my elastic down. So we can go and cut this out now. So cutting out on the seam allowance, not on the stitching line. So this becomes our stitching line, the solid line here. There we go, there is our pattern, and we will cut out 4 of these. So you can see on the pattern here, I've got a 6 centimeter flare there, and I've got a 6 centimeter flare there, which is 12 centimeters per pattern piece. Now this line here, this center line, which was the fold of my pattern piece, will become my grain line. So just draw a line straight across and mark that in as your grain line. So we can take this now to our fabric and we'll cut out 4 pieces. Okay, so this has been cut out with the seam allowance, and what you want to do when you cut out your fabric is just place two pieces right side facing. So I've got two pieces here and another two pieces here, so we've got our 4 pieces for the skirt ready to go. All we need to do from here is just sew the side seam or the seam together. So just sew all the way down on that side and do exactly the same thing all the way down on this side, and then once you've done that, open it out and we'll sew these 2 pieces onto the other 2 pieces. And you can sew all 4 seams together. Because this is stretchy, it's going to fit over our body, and then we'll put our elastic casing in. So we'll take this to the machine and we'll sew all of the pieces together. Okay, now that I have stitched all the side seams together, the side seam, the front seam, all the way around. Now I've just done an overlock stitch all the way around rather than stitching on my machine. If you don't have an overlocker or serger, take it to the machine, do a normal stitch and then do a zigzag on the very edge. With stretch you don't really need to, just a normal stitch will be fine. Anyway, we're ready to put the elastic in. So on the waist area here, we've already got this divided into 4 with our seam lines, and I've got the elastic fitted to my waist. So this is all the way around my waist, and nice and tight. Well, not too tight that I can't breathe. And I've just closed that up with a box stitch all the way around. Now what I want to do is quarter my elastic. Now I don't want my elastic on the dead center, because if I put it on the center there on the seam, it creates a lot of bulk. I'll actually have that off center a little bit. So halve your elastic, put a pin in. Now you want a non-roll elastic, so that means it's not going to roll over your waist very easily. This is quite a sturdy elastic and it prevents rolling at your waist. So pin on either side and then bring those pins together and pin the other 2 sides again. So we have our elastic quartered. What we'll do now it doesn't matter which is back or front, that there's no front or back on this particular skirt. Take your pin and line it up with the edge of your overlocked stitching. So where the seam intersects there, just pin the elastic in place. Right on that seam just there. And we will do the same thing for each quarter. So this is ready now to be taken to the machine and stitched in place. So all we're going to do is stitch close to the edge of the elastic at the top and stitch down the elastic and the waistband of the skirt. Place your skirt and elastic underneath the foot of your machine and start sewing, back stitch. And what we want to do is pull this taut. So we want to stretch out our elastic to fit the skirt. So make sure that when you pull the elastic here, that you're lining up the top of the skirt with the edge of your elastic and start sewing. And keep holding this taut at each pin intersection. And when you get to the end, just backstitch, and that's it. So we've got the waistband attached to the top of the skirt. What we want to do now is just fold this over just once like that, and we'll stitch that down. So we'll be doing exactly the same thing that we've just done, is holding the elastic taut so that we can stitch the waistband down with the fold. So make sure you match your seam with the seam on your overlocked edge, and then we can just stitch down close to the edge of that elastic. Zigzag, backstitch, and hold the fabric taut again like you did before. And make sure that the top of the elastic is actually on the fold of the skirt. And when you get to the beginning, just backstitch. So there we go, we've got our elastic fully encased in the skirt, and that'll never go anywhere. What's left for us to do now is the hem. So I've done a 2 centimetre hem allowance. All I need to do now is just fold up my hem by 2 centimetres all the way around and stitch that down. So if you've got a cover stitch machine, you can do a double row of stitching. If you've got a twin needle, you can actually use twin needles and do a double row of stitching for your hem, or you can just do 2 single rows of stitching on your machine at equal distances apart. So I'm going to go and hem this now, and this hem, whatever you choose to do, will be completely up to you. So there you can see the just a single row of stitching for the waistband with the overlocked edge there, so it's completely secured down. And if we have a look at the bottom of the skirt, I've done 2 rows of stitching. So I've actually done this just on my normal straight stitch sewing machine. I've done 2 even stitches side by side. Now you could use a cover stitch hem, as I mentioned earlier. I was too lazy to get mine out. Or you could put a twin needle on your machine as well and use the twin needle to sew your hem. I've just overlocked the edge and then just done 2 rows of stitching because I was too lazy to go and get another machine and set it all up. It's turned out okay. And as I said earlier, you can make the skirt a lot more flared if you like. So with that kick on your pattern, you can actually bring that out a fair bit more and give this a much bigger flare if you wanted it that way. So there we go, our finished elastic waisted skirt with a double stitched hem, just 4 pieces, and it's come up really well. So this, you just wash it, wear it, do whatever you like, throw it on. You don't have to worry about ironing it. So it's just a really nice, simple skirt that you can have done in under an hour. Hope you've enjoyed this video. If there's anything else you'd like me to make, let me know. Pop a message in the comments down below and I'll see what I can do for you. Catch you next time.